Shalom Alechem, Assalamu Alaikum, Irini Mazisu, Pax Obiscum, welcome to 2nd Samuel, chapter 22. There are 51 verses. Beginning in verse 3, there's an omission of, "He shall be to me my guard." This is also a song, you could say a Psalm of David, in the middle of this book. It says, "He is my protector," in verse 3, versus, "He is my shield." My helper versus my high tower. There's an omission of sure refuge. "You shall save me from the unjust man," versus from violence. Verse 5, "The floods of iniquity amazed me," versus ungodly men made me afraid. So that's an interesting difference there. Verse 6, "The pangs of death," versus the sorrows of hell, or the grave, you could say. And then the agonies of death versus the snares of death prevented me. Verse 7, "When I am afflicted," or whenever I am afflicted, "I will call upon Adonai," versus, "In my distress I called upon." Verse 8, "Confounded," versus, I should say confounded and torn asunder were the foundations of heaven, versus they were moved and shook. So it seems to be a different dynamic in terms of the foundations of heaven being confused and ripped in two versus just being moved and shook, which is a repetition of what was described or connected to the earth, associated with the earth. And then there's an omission of Adonai was wroth with them, not just wroth for no reason, but with them. Who was he wroth with? It seems to be the foundations of heaven, and perhaps the earth as well. Verse 9, wrath versus nostrils. So it's not simply a smoke came out of his nostrils. It seems a little less reverential. However, smoke coming up in his wrath is a greater, more powerful picture. Verse 11, cherubs, plural, versus singular cherub. Verse 12, his hiding place. Now this is interesting. Keeps progressing this description of that his hiding place being darkness, and then it says his tabernacle round about him. So we see a progression. It's not just a hiding place, specifically as a tabernacle, which is, again, more specifically, darkness of waters. And then it says, building upon that description, he condensed it with the clouds of the air. Now in the Masoretic, we don't get that sense. It just says he made darkness pavilions round about him. And then it seems to be separate thoughts of dark waters, thick clouds of the skies. However, when you simply combine them all, you don't get as strong of a picture as tabernacles being condensed rather than just pavilions. And it's also a hiding place as well. So there's multiple descriptions of this hiding place being a tabernacle and then being condensed. Again, darkness of waters versus just dark waters. Are these dirty waters? Are they the waters of the deep being dark? And then condensed it was omitted as well. Verse 16, again, continuous difference of anger, breath of his anger, versus the breath of his nostrils. So it's not just the nostrils. Yes, it's an interesting picture, but it's the breath of his anger specifically, that emotion, that it's a motivation perhaps, that not the motivation, but the overall feeling expressed in this verse. Verse 19, the days of my affliction prevented me. So it's the affliction that period of affliction prevented him versus they prevented me. So individuals versus simply the season affecting his emotions, perhaps. Verse 24, blameless versus upright. So upright can also mean complete. I was complete before him, but blameless in the Septuagint. 25, will recompense me versus has. So future versus past. An omission of the purity of my hands. So it's not just purity or cleanness. It's associated with purity of hands, of your actions. 26, significant difference. Holy, you will be holy versus you will be merciful. You will be holy with the holy, so set apart with the set apart versus merciful to the merciful. They're both very, pleasant thoughts. It's just, again, the Septuagint is more accurate. So being set apart with the set apart, it will be blameless or perfect with the perfect. And then upright is the terminology used in the Masoretic. 27, excellent versus pure. The footnote for this verse reads choice or elect. So you will be elect or choice with the choice or elect. And then the froward, you will be froward, which means difficult to deal with the difficult to deal with. That makes sense. However, unsavory means twisted, can mean twisted. You will be twisted with the difficult to deal with. It sounds a little evil in my opinion. It doesn't sound good. It doesn't sound characteristic of Adonai. Verse 28, the poor people versus the afflicted people. And you will bring down the eyes of the haughty versus your eyes are upon the haughty. So he's looking on them, but why would he look on them? That doesn't seem, again, characteristic of Adonai. But the purpose of doing that is to bring them down. Okay, so they try to recover that verse by saying, okay, his eyes are upon them, but not for good purposes. It's for bringing them down, humbling them. Verse 30, girded man, and in the footnote for this, I remember what it says. It's a warrior. So like an armored man, a warrior, versus running through a troop. Verse 31. Just want to revisit 30. Actually, girded man, when someone's armored, you have more confidence to go into battle. Naturally. Verse 31. Strong and tried in the fire is the word of Elohim. That is, or of Adonai. That is a very important detail that is omitted in the Masoretic. It says simply tried. It doesn't say that it's been tried in the fire. It doesn't say that it's strong either. So those are some glaring omissions, I would say. Continuous difference is he's a protector versus a buckler or a shield, as it's also described. So you're going to see that throughout this chapter. Verse 32, a big difference here. So first one, it says, who is strong versus who is El, who is God, except Adonai. So it describes him as strong. And why I say this is a big difference is because the next part of the verse says, who will be a creator? Who is the one who creates except Elohim versus just a rock? And I'm not trying to diminish the status of being a rock, but being a creator is a lot higher up than being a rock, because it's been mentioned over and over, but being a creator, only one can claim that. Verse 33, strengthens me with might. Strengthens me with might. He is the one who strengthens me. How? Gives him might, gives him power. Versus Adonai, or I should say Elohim, is my strength and power. So he is the strength and power. I'm not saying this is not true. It's just not how it is written here. Verse 34. the high places versus my high places. So it's not David's high places, they are the high places of the earth. Verse 36, my salvation versus your salvation. Your propitious dealing has increased me versus gentleness. Your gentleness has made me great. So, on the one hand, the Septuagint is saying, because you've supplied me the things I needed, how you've supplied me, the way you've supplied me increased me, whether it's physically or with physical health or resources, versus status. He's made me great. Not so much the health or even resources. It's talking about me, the way I feel, or status. I think the focus on status. It's on status rather than resources. Verse 37, there's an omission of so as to. So this is relating to the previous verse. So what does the increase in the propitious dealing lead to? It enables David, King David, to have room under him for the way he is going. So much so his legs did not totter or slip. However, in the Masoretic, they're two different thoughts. They're not related. I'm great, and then it says, you have enlarged my steps. So they're not related, whereas they are connected in the Septuagint. Verse 38, future versus past. Verse 39, crush them versus consumed and wounded. So interesting to note, when you consume your enemy, yes, it seems to be an end. They can't arise, but if you just wound them, they can always heal. But crushing an enemy will lead to them not rising. And if we look at the Proto-Evangelion or Proto-Evangelion, the first prophecy about the Messiah says that he will crush his head. So perhaps this is a messianic prophecy or related to that. Okay, so that's 39. 40, strengthen me with power. Again, strengthen me with power versus girded me with strength. Okay, that's an interesting difference. Verse 41, we have a big difference. I'm going to read it slow. You have caused my enemies to flee before me, even them that hated me, and you have slain them. What does it say in the Masoretic? You have also given me the necks of my enemies. So on one hand, the enemies are fleeing in the Septuagint, but here in the Masoretic, the necks of his enemies are given to King David. We can see it's not King David who's doing the destruction. It is Adonai who is causing them not only to flee, but even, again, them that hate him. Who has slain them? Adonai did. Adonai has slain David's enemies. It's not David doing it. But in the Masoretic, it's David who is, in a way, taking revenge or taking vengeance upon his enemies. No, it's Adonai who's the one who delivers them to him, but he's also the one who ultimately is causing them to flee. Now, is this talking about only David, or is this also perhaps a messianic prophecy? That's an interesting thought. Verse 42, they shall cry, the enemies, versus they looked. Okay. Verse 44, an addition of, and did spread them abroad. So he spread them abroad. I don't see where that, that's verse 43. My mistake. So spreading abroad, I believe it's the dirt, the mire of the street. Verse 45, past versus future. Seems to be a common difference, a continuous difference, because again, in the Greek specifically, verbs are not conjugated unless, I should say they're not conjugated. I should say that it's difficult to know what is the tense. Is the verb past, future, or present? That one is not, it's not given to know. It's reliant on the translators. Here it says strange children in 45 and 46 versus strangers. So it is referring to children. So children of foreigners, perhaps. And then it says feigned obedience to me. So they pretended to be obedient versus they submitted. There's no pretension. There's no falsity. But we can see the results of pretending to be obedient. They will be cast away versus just fade away. So they're going to be rejected. They're going to be cast out. And they shall be overthrown out of their hiding places. Versus they're going to be just made afraid. They're not going to be cast out. They won't be overthrown. They're going to be just made to fade and be afraid. And then it describes hiding places versus close places. Perhaps closed places make sense. 47 says my guardian versus rock. Again, that's repeated multiple times, but a guardian just seems more strong. A strong keeper. Speaking of which, strong keeper, strong guardian versus rock of my salvation. Again, that language is used very often in the scriptures. Not to diminish it, but strong keeper evokes more stronger imagery. No pun intended. And the footnote reads, the keeper of my salvation. That's an interesting description, or interesting wording. Verse 48, there's an omission of Adonai who avenges me is strong. So again, that seems to be a common omission, not only with the word of Adonai, which is strong and tested by fire, but even Adonai himself. Him being strong was omitted. So there's less of a reverential tone in the Masoretic, and greater reverence and greater praise is given to Adonai in the Septuagint, noticeably, especially in this chapter. Now, talking about the chastening of the nations under me versus brings down the people under me. So the difference here is that foreign nations are being corrected or punished, perhaps, versus Israel, perhaps, or some other people are being humbled. 49, future versus past. There's a footnote as well, talking about the violent man instead of violent man, or it suggests a man of wrongs. So you shall deliver me from the man of wrongs. Is this talking about the Antichrist, perhaps? That's a possibility. If we're looking at a man of wrongs, or is it just someone who commits wrongs? Verse 50, I will confess to you, versus I will give you thanks. There's an addition of praises, so I will sing to your name. Verse 51, he magnifies the salvation of his king. This could be a messianic prophecy, potentially. And the footnote says he magnifies the salvation, so plural, of his king. Versus the tower of salvation for his king. And then it says his seed forever. So in both it says that. So again, this could be messianic as well. Prophecy referring to the seed that was mentioned in the Proto-Evangelion, again in Genesis, I believe it's 1:29, if I'm not mistaken. He will crush your head, and he will watch your head, you will watch us heal. So I think that's it for this chapter. I just wanted to focus again on He magnifies. Who is magnifying? Adonai is magnifying the salvation of his king. Who is it, the salvation of David? Is it the fact that he's being saved, or is it Yeshua, which literally means salvation of Adonai? So it's an interesting thing to reflect on. Thank you very much for your time. Till next time, I bid you all Shalom Aleichem. Yivarechecha Adonai v'yishmerecha. Salamu alaikum. Wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Irini mazisu. Pax vobiscum. Peace be unto you. May God bless you and keep you. And Maranatha.